The quiet was the deepest thing about space. Not an empty quiet, but a heavy one, filled with the hum of the ship's engines and the beep of scanners. On the bridge of the Guangzhou's Hope, a salvage ship that had seen better days, Captain Park Jae watched the stars drift by. They were near the big ring of rocks and ice, called the asteroid belt. Far from the busy space lanes of Earth, Jae was a man who liked simple things, a job to do, a good crew, and the honest silence of the void. His ship was his home. His crew were his family. There was Lee Soo-min at the pilot's controls, her fingers always moving, checking and rechecking their path. And in the engine room below, Kim Tae-shik kept the old ship flying with skill and stubbornness. "Captain," Soo-min said, her voice cutting through the quiet, "I'm getting a strange signal. Very faint. It's not on any registry." Jae walked over to her station. On the screen, the sensor showed a small, blurry shape. It was not a rock. It had straight lines and a shape that was made by someone, not by nature. But it was wrong. It was too small to be a real ship, and it was cold with almost no power. "A life pod," Jay said softly. "But whose?" "The signal is weak and old," Soo-min replied, tuning the scanners. "It's on a loop, a distress call. But the language, it's not one I know." Tae-shik's voice came over the speaker from the engine room. "I'm reading weird metals out there. Nothing we use. Should we take a closer look?" Jay thought for a moment. Their job was to find valuable scrap, not to rescue people. But the rules of space were clear. A distress call was a distress call. "You answered. Bring us in slow, Soo-min. Tae-shik, get the cargo bay ready. We might have a guest." The Guangzhou's Hope moved closer, its lights cutting through the eternal dark. The pod was a sad sight. It was an oblong shape, like a giant seed. Its surface was covered in pits and scars from tiny space rocks. One side was blackened, as if from a fire. It was spinning slowly, a lonely thing forgotten by the universe. Soo-min used the ship's robotic arms to gently grab the pod. She pulled it into the big, open cargo bay. The bay was cold and lit by harsh white lights. It was filled with stacks of old metal and machine parts they had collected. The pod looked very small and very alone sitting in the middle of it. Jae and Soo-min put on their heavy work suits and went into the bay. Tae-shik joined them, holding a big cutting tool. The air in the bay was always cold, but now it felt colder. The three of them stood around the pod. There was a sealed door on one end. No words were written on it, just strange symbols that curved and twisted. "No heat signs inside," Soo-min said, looking at her handheld scanner. "But there is a very low energy reading, like a machine on standby for a very long time." "Stand back," Tae-shik said. He was a careful man. He aimed his cutting tool at the seal around the door. A bright blue flame sparked and hissed. The metal glowed red, then white. With a loud clunk, the seal broke. The door did not open. It was still stuck. Jae moved forward. He found a manual release, a simple lever hidden under a panel. He pulled it. With a groan and a long hiss of old air, the door of the pod swung open. A wave of cold air rushed out. It smelled strange, like the air after a lightning storm, mixed with something sweet and stale, like old flowers. A pale, faint light came from inside. Jae stepped up to the opening and looked in. His breath caught in his throat. Inside was not a simple cabin with seats. It was filled with a thick, clear gel. The gel was dry now, cracked like a dry lake bed. And curled in the middle of it were three figures. They were not human, but they were close. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. They wore simple silver suits that were torn in places. Their skin was pale, almost gray. but along their temples and the backs of their hands, they had fine lines that shimmered like mother of pearl, like the inside of a seashell. Their hair was stark white, short and matted with the dry gel. They were terribly thin. Their faces were sharp with hunger, and their eyes were closed. They were alive. J could see the slow, shallow rise and fall of their chests. By all the stars, Su Min whispered from behind him. Tae Shik was already moving. They're in hibernation. Or something like it. The gel. It was their life support. It's failed? Get the medical kits from the ship, Jay said, his voice firm. And the portable heaters. Gently. Move very gently. They worked quickly. They cut away the rest of the door. They carefully broke the hard gel around the three bodies. Jay and Tae Shik lifted the first one out. It was light. Too light for its size. It was a female, he thought, though it was hard to tell. Su Min brought blankets and laid them on the floor of the bay. They placed the three aliens on the blankets and covered them with more. The one Jay had carried out. The female suddenly stirred. A shudder went through her body. Her eyelids, which were a pale lavender color, fluttered. Jay knelt down beside her. It's okay, he said softly, knowing she could not understand. You are safe. The alien's eyes opened. They were large and a luminous silver color, with no white part at all. The pupil was a dark slit. For a second, those eyes were wide with pure animal terror. She tried to scramble back, but she was too weak. Then the terror faded, replaced by a deep, bottomless confusion. She looked at Jay's human face, at the bright lights of the cargo bay, at the metal walls. Her lips moved. A sound came out. A raspy, clicking word. The small computer in Jay's suit pocket, which could translate many languages, buzzed. A robotic voice spoke from the speaker, struggling with the alien sounds. The translator said, "Where?" The alien female spoke again, her voice a dry leaf rustling. The translator processed it. Covenant. Broken. She took a ragged breath, her silver eyes fixed on Jay. Pleading for understanding. The translator spoke her last, desperate words. They abandoned us. They left us to die. Then her eyes rolled back, and she fell unconscious again. The cargo bay was silent, except for the hum of the heaters. Jay looked from the three frail beings on the floor to the dark, scarred pod that had been their tomb. He thought about the vast, uncaring space outside his ship. He thought about being left behind. Get them to the medical bay, Jay said, his voice low. Warm them up. Give them fluids. Do everything you can. As Su Min and Tae Shik moved to carry out his orders, Jay stayed for a moment. He looked at the symbols on the pod. He did not know what covenant meant, but he knew what abandoned meant. And in the silence of the cargo bay, with the stars watching through the open bay doors, a feeling settled in his chest. It was a cold feeling, but it was also a firm one. They were not just salvage anymore. They were people, and they were his responsibility now. The medical bay of the Gwangju's Hope was small and clean. The three aliens lay on beds, connected to machines that beeped softly. Warm fluids dripped into their thin arms. Under the bright lights, they looked even more fragile. Their skin was like paper, and the shimmering scales on their temples seemed dull. Captain Park Jae sat on a stool nearby, watching them sleep. Lee Soo-min was checking the readings on a screen. Kim Tae-shik had gone to send a message to Earth. They had to report what they found. It was the law. Their bodies are like ours, mostly, Soo-min said quietly. But their blood is different. It uses copper, not iron. That's why it's greenish. And their life signs? They were very close to stopping. Jay just nodded. He kept thinking about the words from the translator. Abandoned. The female, the one who had spoken, was the first to wake up properly. It was a few hours later. Her silver eyes opened slowly. She did not panic this time. She looked around the room, then at Jay. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes were deep and full of a quiet pain. Jay picked up the translator device. It was now learning from the alien's few words. "Can you understand me?" he asked slowly. The device spoke his words in her clicking, melodic language. Her eyes widened a little. She nodded very slightly. "My name is Jay," he said, pointing to himself. "This is my ship. You are safe." The translator repeated it. She listened. Then she lifted a trembling hand and touched her own chest. "Era," she whispered. The sound was soft, like wind over water. "Era," Jay repeated. He pointed to the other two aliens, a male and a younger female, still sleeping. "Your people? My kin siblings," Era said, the translator finding the closest words. "Mako Tallin." She tried to sit up, but she was too weak. She fell back against the pillow. "The others? The ship?" Jay understood the question. He shook his head. "We only found your pod. Nothing else." Era closed her eyes. A single tear, clear and shining like a diamond, traced a path down her cheek. "Then it is true. All is lost." She began to talk. Her voice was weak, but the story was strong and terrible. The translator worked hard, sometimes stopping to find words. Era and her people were called the Kelly. They came from a group of stars far away, a peaceful group of different species who had made promises to each other. Promises of trade and protection. A covenant. But there was a fight for power. A new leader rose among the Kelly's own people. He saw Era's family, who were teachers and builders, as a threat. They were not soldiers. They believed in old ways of peace. "They came to our home ship in the night," Era said, her voice flat. "They took the command. They deleted us from the records. We were no longer people. We were a problem." She took a shaky breath. "The polite ones, the ones who did not want blood on their hands, they put us in the old life pod. They said it was mercy. They pointed us at a yellow star and pushed us away. They broke the air system. They left us just enough power for the distress signal to scream into nothing. They knew no one would hear. It was a quiet death." Jay felt a cold anger growing in his stomach. It was a cruel way to die, to be thrown away by your own people. Just then, Taishik's voice came over the speaker. His tone was tense. "Captain, you need to see this. Earth Council is responding. It's not good." Jay told Era to rest. He and Su-min went to the bridge. On the main screen was an official message from the United Earth Council. A man in a neat suit was speaking. "Salvage vessel Guangzhou's Hope, you are ordered to hold position. Do not approach Earth. A diplomatic team is being assembled. The beings you have recovered are identified as Kali. They are involved in an internal conflict of the Kali Consortium. Earth cannot take sides. You will be met at the edge of our space, and the survivors will be transferred to a neutral station for processing." The screen changed to news reports. Experts were talking. Words flashed on the screen. Political hot potato. Refugee crisis. Do not ingest foreign conflict. One woman on the news said, "Our first duty is to Earth. These aliens bring nothing but risk. Their own government disavows them. Why should we take them in?" Jay turned off the screen. The bridge was quiet. The quiet felt different now. It was not peaceful. It was heavy, like a storm was coming. "They want us to hand them over," Su-min said, her voice tight. "To a neutral station," Jay repeated. He knew what that meant. It was a place of gray walls and endless waiting. A place where people without a home were forgotten. Era and her kin siblings would never leave it. They would die there alone for a second time. Over the next 2 days, more messages came. They were all the same. Earth was afraid. The Cali Consortium was a powerful group. Giving the refugees a home could be seen as an insult. It could hurt trade. It could start trouble. It was easier to pretend they did not exist. Che spent hours in the medical bay. Era grew stronger. She learned some basic human words. Mako and Tolan woke up. They were young and scared. They clung to Era. They watched the humans with big silver eyes that held both fear and a flicker of hope. That hope was the worst part. One evening, Jay was in his small room, watching another news report. A politician was speaking loudly. We cannot save everyone. Our resources are for Earth citizens. These creatures are not our concern. On the screen behind the politician, a blurry picture of Era's face was shown. They called her a biological contingency, a liability. Jay turned it off. He looked out his window at the stars. He thought about his own grandparents. They had fled a war on Earth long ago, when countries still fought. They had been turned away from many places before finding a home. They said the coldest thing was not the weather, but the closed door. There was a soft knock. Su Min came in. She did not speak for a moment. Then she said, "My parents ran a small restaurant. They always fed anyone who was hungry, even if they had no money. They said a full belly makes a person, no matter where they are from." Tae-shik's voice came from the doorway. He had been listening. "The order is clear, Captain. We are to meet the transfer ship in 48 hours. He paused. His hands, usually stained with grease, were clean and still. But an old ship like this, sometimes its navigation system has errors. Sometimes its engine gets a flutter. It would be a shame if we had to change course for an emergency landing." Jay looked at Su Min. He looked at Tae-shik. He saw no doubt in their eyes. They had all heard Era's story. They had all seen the news. They were not just following an order anymore. They were making a choice. Jay stood up. The cold feeling in his chest was gone, replaced by a clear, solid purpose. "Send a message to Earth Control," Jay said, his voice calm and firm. "Tell them we acknowledge the order. Tell them we are proceeding to the rendezvous point." He looked at his crew. "And then, Tae-shik, I want you to look at the main engine. It seems to be running rough. We might need to find a quiet place to set down." He walked back to the medical bay. Era was awake, teaching Mako a human word. "Safe," she was saying. "S-S-S-afe." Jay stood in the doorway. Era looked up at him. She was very smart. She saw the decision on his face. The hope in her eyes grew brighter, but also more afraid. Hope was dangerous. Jay did not need the translator. He simply nodded to her. He did not know what would happen next. He knew it could cost him his ship, his career, his freedom. But as he looked at the three beings his crew had pulled from the dark, he knew one thing for certain. He would not be the one to close the door. The Gwangju's hope turned toward Earth, but its path was a lie. On the bridge, Captain Park Jae watched the blue planet grow larger on the screen. It looked peaceful and welcoming. He knew it was not for everyone. Lee Su-min's hands moved over the pilot's controls. "I've plotted the official course," she said, her voice low. "It takes us to the high-orbit docking ring. That's where they'll be waiting." Kim Tae-shik's voice crackled from the engine room below. "The engine flutter is ready on your command, Captain. It will look real. It will burn extra fuel and make a lot of heat on the scanners. They'll think we're in trouble." "Good," Jay said. He turned to the communication screen. He pressed a button to send a message to Earth Control. His face was calm. "This is Captain Park Jae of the Gwangju's Hope. We are on approach to the rendezvous point. Our engine is showing some instability. We are monitoring it." He kept the message short. Lies were better when they were simple. In the medical bay, Era stood by the window, looking at Earth. Mako and Tallinn stood close to her. They were all dressed in simple human clothes from the ship's storage. The clothes were too big, but they were warm. "It is so green," Era whispered. The translator around her neck spoke the words in Korean for the others. Mako, the younger female, reached out a thin hand as if she could touch the clouds. "Is that where we are going?" Tallinn, the boy, asked. His voice was full of a hope that made Jay's heart feel heavy. "We are going to find a quiet place," Jay said, coming into the room. He chose his words carefully. "The first place may have many people. Too many questions. We need somewhere quieter to rest." He saw Era's intelligent eyes studying him. She knew he was not telling the whole truth. She had learned what fear looked like on a human face. Back on the bridge, the timer counted down. They were getting close to the point where they would be met by the official Earthship. Jay took a deep breath. "Now, Tae-shik." A deep, shuddering groan echoed through the ship. The lights flickered. On the control panels, warning lights flashed red. An alarm beeped loudly. Su-min quickly shut off the alarm, but let the lights keep flashing. Jay hit the communication button again. This time, he let a little strain into his voice. "Earth Control, this is Gwangju's Hope. We have a major drive fluctuation. It's getting worse. We cannot maintain our course to the rendezvous. Requesting emergency descent protocol. Repeat, we are making an emergency landing." A controller's voice came back, sharp and worried. "Gwangju's Hope, state your intention. You must hold position." "Negative," Jay said, his voice firm over the fake noise of the straining engine. "Safety of the vessel is critical. We are descending on the nearest approved emergency vector. Sending our landing track now." He nodded to Su-min. She sent a flight path to Earth Control. It showed them heading for a big, official spaceport in the middle of a city. It was a normal emergency plan, but as soon as the message was sent, Su-min's fingers flew across her console. She deleted that course. She typed in a new one. This one did not go to a city. It pointed to a remote, mountainous area on the Korean peninsula, a place of deep valleys and few people. The ship turned slowly at first, then more sharply. It began to fall from the high, cold space toward the warm, thick air of Earth. The ride down was rough. The ship shook and rattled as it hit the atmosphere. Orange fire glowed outside the windows. Jay held onto his chair. He trusted Su-min completely. She was the best pilot he knew. Her face was focused, her eyes fixed on the changing numbers. They broke through the clouds. It was night below and raining. The land was a dark blanket of jagged mountains. Lights from small towns were like tiny stars on the ground. "There," Su-min said, pointing to a wide, dark valley between two forested ridges. "The scan shows it's flat. No power lines. No houses. Take us down," Jay said. The Gwangju's Hope lowered itself on its landing legs. It was not a gentle landing. It was a heavy thud that shook the whole ship. Mud and grass sprayed up against the windows. Then everything was still. The only sound was the ping of hot metal cooling and the soft patter of rain. They were down. They were not where they were supposed to be. Jay stood up. His legs felt weak, but from relief, not fear. "Tae-shik, kill all non-essential power. Go to silent running. Su-min, get the door ready." He went to the medical bay. Era and the two young ones were huddled together. The rough landing had scared them. "Is it over?" Era asked. "The first part," Jay said. "Now comes the hard part. We must see who is out there." He put on a plain coat. Su Min and Tae Shik joined him, also in simple clothes. They did not take weapons. Weapons would send the wrong message. With a hiss, the main door of the ship opened. A ramp extended down into the wet grass. The smell of rain, dirt, and pine trees washed into the ship. It was a clean, alive smell, so different from the recycled air of space. Jay stepped out first. The rain was cool on his face. The valley was dark and quiet. In the distance, he could see a few lights from a small town. For a few minutes, nothing happened. They stood in the rain, listening. Then, a light appeared between the trees. Not a bright, official light. A bobbing, yellow flashlight beam. Then another. Figures came out of the forest. They were not soldiers. They were ordinary people in raincoats and boots. A man with a kind, weathered face. A young woman who looked like him, maybe his sister. An older woman holding an umbrella, her expression serious, but not angry. The man with the flashlight, Choi Hai-in, stopped a good distance away. He looked at the big, battered ship, then at the three humans standing in the mud. "Are you in trouble?" He called out, his voice echoing in the quiet valley. "Do you need help?" Jay took a step forward. He raised his empty hands. "We have people who need shelter," he said, his voice clear in the rain. "They have nowhere else to go." From inside the ship, Ira appeared at the top of the ramp. The light from inside made her white hair glow. Her silver eyes reflected the flashlight beams. She looked down at the small group of strangers. A gasp came from the young woman, Nurse Ji-yoon. She took a step forward, not in fear, but in curiosity. What are they?" "They are refugees," Jay said. "Their own people left them to die in space. Earth's government does not want them. We broke the rules to bring them here." The older woman, Mrs. Bay, pushed her umbrella forward. She walked right past Jay and Su Min. She walked up the muddy ramp until she stood in front of Era. She was much shorter than the tall, thin alien. She looked up into Era's strange, beautiful face. She saw the fear there. She also saw the dignity that Mrs. Bay did not speak to Jay. She spoke directly to Era. She said one word, warm and firm. "Azio." It meant come in. It was what you said to a guest when you welcomed them into your home. Era did not understand the word, but she understood the tone. She understood the old woman's face, which was kind and strong. The fear in Era's eyes began to melt. A single shining tear fell, mixing with the rain on her cheek. She turned and called into the ship. Mako and Tolin came out, holding onto each other. They looked at the humans, at the trees, at the rainy sky they had never seen before. Choi Hai-in lowered his flashlight. He looked at his sister, Ji-yoon. She nodded. He looked at Mrs. Bay. She nodded back, her face certain. "Okay," Choi Hai-in said simply. He turned to Jay. "You can't stay in the ship. They will find you. There is an old community lodge. It is empty for the winter. It is warm. It has a roof." Captain Park Jay felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders. They were not safe yet, not even close. But the door had not been closed. It had been opened in the soft rain of a Korean mountain night. 3 lost souls from the stars took their first steps onto solid ground, led not by soldiers or officials, but by a farmer, a nurse, and an old woman with an umbrella. The old community lodge was not fancy, but it was solid. It was made of warm wood and had a heavy roof to keep out the mountain snow. Mrs. Bay had the key. She opened the door and showed them inside. It smelled of pine and clean dust. There was a big main room with tables, a kitchen, and smaller rooms for sleeping. For the first few days, the Kelly did not leave the lodge. They were too weak and too scared. The world outside the windows was overwhelming. So many colors. The green of the trees, the blue of the sky, the white of the clouds. On their ship, colors had been muted. Here, everything was loud and bright, and a live nurse Ji-yoon came every day. She checked their health. She brought simple food: rice porridge, soft vegetables, clear soup. The Kali bodies were different, but they could eat human food. They liked the warmth of it. Choi Ha-yeon came too. He brought firewood and showed Kim Tae-shik how the old heating system worked. He did not ask many questions. He just did things that were helpful. Captain J and his crew stayed at the lodge too. They became the link between the mountain town and the stars. Lee Soo-min used the ship's small computer to monitor news from the outside world. The story of the missing ship was getting smaller. Earth government was still looking, but they were looking in the wrong places. They thought Jay was hiding in some asteroid belt, not in a forest. Era was the first to want to help. She saw Mrs. Bay and other women from the town working in the big garden behind the lodge, preparing the soil for planting. Era walked outside slowly. The sun felt strange on her skin. She knelt in the dirt next to Mrs. Bay. She pointed to the soil, then to herself. "I can help?" Mrs. Bay smiled and handed her a small trowel. Era's hands were long and thin. She touched the dark earth. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, she began to work. Her movements were careful and precise. The other women watched, curious. They saw that where Ira worked, the hard soil seemed to become softer, richer. It was a small thing, but it was a good thing. Mako, the younger female, was shy. She stayed inside with Soo-min. Soo-min was fixing a broken radio from the town. She had parts spread out on a table. Mako watched with her big silver eyes. She pointed to a small coil of wire. "This is for connection?" Mako asked, her Korean slow but clear. "Yes," Soo-min said, surprised. "It helps the signal." Mako nodded. Her fingers, which were even longer and more delicate than Era's, reached out. She did not touch the radio. She touched a fishing net that Choi Ha-yeon had left in the corner, torn and tangled. She picked it up. She started to work on the knots. Her fingers moved in a way that did not seem possible. The tight, wet knots seemed to loosen for her. In an hour, the net was fixed, perfect, and even Choi Ha-yeon saw it later. He was amazed. "My grandfather made that net," he said. "I thought it was trash now." He looked at Mako with new respect. He brought her more broken things: a watch, a door hinge, a child's toy. She fixed them all, not with tools, but with an incredible patience and an understanding of how things fit together. Tolin, the boy, was full of energy. He followed Choi Ha-yeon everywhere. Ha-yeon was a forestry worker. He took Tolin into the woods to check animal tracks and weather sensors. Tolin learned the Korean words for pine, for oak, for moss. He was fascinated by the squirrels and the birds. He had never seen animals before. One day, Tolin found a small injured bird on the ground. Its wing was bent. He picked it up gently, his face full of worry. He brought it to Ji-yoon. She showed him how to make a small splint from twigs and cloth. Tolin sat with the bird for hours, talking to it in a soft mix of Kelly clicks and Korean words. The bird, which should have been scared, was calm in his hands. Slowly, the lodge stopped being a hiding place. It became a home. The people from the town started to visit not just to help, but to talk. They brought food to share. They sat at the big tables and ate together. The humans taught the Kali how to make kimchi, how to roll kimbap. The Kali showed them how to make patterns with light using a small crystal they had saved from their pod. It was not magic. It was science. But to the humans, It looked like magic, and it was beautiful. The fear did not go away. Sometimes at night, Era would look at the stars, and her face would become sad. She missed her own sky. She missed her old life. She worried about being found. Su Min's news scans showed that Earth's search was dying down, but it was not gone. One evening, a retired man from the town, a former engineer, came to see Taishik. He had heard about the ship hidden in the valley. He brought a box of old electronic parts. "For your engine repairs," he said with a wink. He was not alone. Other people in other towns, people who had worked in space or who just believed in helping, began to send quiet messages. They formed a loose secret network. They provided things the Cali needed, special medicines made from their blood readings. Certain metals for their health.Earth was still out there, loud and busy and political. But here in the mountains, something simpler was happening. Bonds were being made not with words or laws, but with actions. With a shared meal, with a fixed net, with a healed bird. One afternoon, Era was in the garden. The first green shoots were coming up. Mrs. Bay stood next to her, looking at their work. "Your plants grow well," Mrs. Bay said. Era touched a green shoot. "The soil is good here. The rain is good." She paused, searching for the right words. "On our ship, we grew food in light boxes. It was without a soul. This," she touched the earth, "this has a soul. This world has a strong, warm soul." Mrs. Bay nodded. She understood. She looked at Era, this strange, tall woman from the stars who loved the dirt. "You are not a guest anymore, Era," Mrs. Bay said firmly. "You are part of the garden now. You belong to this place." Era did not cry, but she stood up straight. For the first time since they pulled her from the cold pod, the weight of being lost seemed to lift from her shoulders. She was not abandoned here. She was being woven in. Thread by thread, kindness by kindness, she and her kin were becoming part of the fabric of the quiet mountains. They had been given more than shelter. They were being given a place. A full cycle of seasons passed in the mountains. The green summer turned to a fiery autumn, then a quiet, white winter, and now it was spring again. The community lodge was no longer just a building. It was a home, warm and comfortable. Flower pots, made by Mako from local clay, sat by the windows. The garden Ira helped tend was already showing promising green shoots. The people from the stars had become part of the town. Era helped at the local school, showing children the simple, beautiful math of crystal patterns. Mako had a small repair shop in the town's market, fixing everything from phones to tractors with her clever fingers. Tolan worked with Choi Ha-yeon in the forestry service, his understanding of living things making him a natural with the local plants and animals. Captain Jay and his crew still lived there too. Their ship, the Gwangju's Hope, sat hidden under a canopy of nets and fallen branches in the valley. It was mostly quiet now. They had become farmers, builders, and friends, but the outside world had not forgotten completely. The official search for the rogue salvage vessel had grown cold, filed away under unsolved mysteries. Yet sometimes, a persistent bureaucrat would follow a thread. One such man was Inspector Park Min-woo. He was not a soldier. He was a government investigator, a man who liked puzzles and did not like loose ends. An old energy signature report, a strange piece of space junk found far from its expected path, small things that others ignored, had led him. Slowly, to the mountains of Gangwon province, he arrived in a simple car, wearing a plain suit. He asked careful questions at the small town office. He was polite. He showed a picture of the Gwangju's Hope to the woman at the front desk. "Have you ever seen a craft like this? It might have landed here, perhaps in an emergency, about a year ago." The woman, who was Mrs. Bay's niece, looked at the picture. Her face showed nothing. A ship? Here? No, Inspector. That looks like something from the city. We only have trucks and tractors here. But as soon as he left, she picked up her phone. The message spread through the town faster than a forest fire. He is here. He is asking. By the time Inspector Park drove up the muddy track toward the old lodge, the whole valley knew. He expected secrecy. He expected to find a hidden ship and frighten people. He did not expect what he saw. In front of the lodge. In the soft afternoon sun, a normal scene was unfolding. Captain Jay and Kim Tae-shik were fixing the roof of a shed. Lee Soo-min and Nurse Ji-eun were hanging laundry on a line. Choi Hye-yan and Tolan were unloading bags of soil from a truck. And in the garden, Era and Mrs. Bay were kneeling side by side, weeding a row of vegetables. It was so ordinary, so peaceful. Inspector Park stopped his car and got out, feeling strangely out of place in his neat suit. Era saw him first. She stood up slowly. She did not run. She simply wiped her hands on her pants, the same as any farmer would. One by one, the others stopped their work. They gathered together, not in a defensive line, but as a group of people who belonged to that spot of earth. Jay walked forward to meet the inspector. "Can I help you?" Jay asked, his voice calm. Inspector Park held up his identification. "I am looking for a ship, and for 3 undocumented extraterrestrial individuals." He looked past Jay at Era. Her white hair and shimmering skin were impossible to hide. "It seems I have found them." "You have found us," Era said, her Korean now fluent and clear. She walked forward to stand beside Jay. Mako and Tulin came and stood with her. "We are not hiding." Inspector Park was confused. This was not a confrontation. It was a meeting. "My orders are to take you into custody and arrange for your transfer to a federal holding facility," he stated. Though the words felt hollow in the mountain air. From the porch of the lodge, Mrs. Bay spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the quiet authority of the mountains. "That will not be possible." The inspector turned to her. "Madam, this is a matter of interplanetary law." "This is a matter of the heart," Mrs. Bay replied. She came down the steps. She was just an old woman, but she seemed to fill the space. "These people are under our protection. They are part of our town. They are our neighbors, our family." As she spoke, more people arrived, not with weapons, but with presents. The shopkeeper from town, the school teacher, the retired engineer, dozens of men and women from the valley, standing quietly behind Mrs. Bay, behind Jay, behind the Kelly. Their faces were not angry. They were determined. Inspector Park looked at the crowd. He looked at the Kelly, standing tall and unafraid among the humans. He looked at the mended shed, the thriving garden, the laundry flapping in the breeze. He saw a home. He had been sent to find a political problem, but there was no problem here. There was only a community. He thought about his report. He thought about his career. He thought about the cold, gray walls of a federal holding facility. Then he looked at Tolan, who was still holding a bag of soil, his silver eyes wide with the fear he was trying hard to control. Inspector Park let out a long, slow breath. He reached into his jacket pocket. Everyone tensed, but he only pulled out his datapad. He looked at the official order glowing on the screen. He looked at the people in front of him. His finger hovered over the screen. Then he deliberately pressed a sequence of keys. The order disappeared. He entered a new report. He spoke as he typed, his voice formal for the record. Investigation log, Inspector Park, Min Woo. Followed energy signature to remote valley in Gangwon Province. No sign of unauthorized spacecraft. Locals report no unusual activity. The trail has gone cold. He looked up from the pad, his official mask gone. He gave a small, almost invisible smile. Permanently. A ripple of relief went through the crowd. The tension broke like a snapped string. Mrs. Bay stepped forward again. This time, she was not a defender. She was a host. You have had a long drive, Inspector. Would you like some tea? We have good tea here. The inspector, his job done in the most unexpected way, nodded. Tea would be very welcome. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, everyone shared a meal. The inspector sat at the long table, eating kimchi stew and listening to stories, not about spaceships and conspiracies, but about the first vegetable Era grew, about the bird Tallene healed, about Mako fixing the town's old clock tower. Later, under a sky now thick with stars, Inspector Park stood with Jay and Ara, looking at the hidden shape of the Guangzhou's hope in the valley below. They will not look here again, the inspector said quietly. The file is closed. Era looked up at the stars, then at the warm lights of the lodge windows. My people believed shelter was a contract. When we broke no contract, they broke our shelter. She turned to Jay, then to the lodge where Mrs. Bay's laughter could be heard. You gave us shelter with no contract, just because it was the right thing to do. Your leaders may have turned us away, but your people, they opened the door. Jay nodded. He finally understood what they had really given the Cali. It was not just a hiding place. It was not just safety. It was a belonging. They had been abandoned by the cold, logical politics of the stars. But Earth, in its messy, kind, and stubborn way, had given them the one thing they needed most, a place to call home. And in the quiet mountains, under the watchful stars, that home was now complete.